Troy, thank you for joining me this afternoon. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. How you doing, Bruce?
Doing great, man. It's good to and good to talk to you. We're both in our busy adult lives. You especially now as a father, which is wild thinking about. We first met in like seventh grade, so
Yeah,
that's always a trip.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, with this, I always like to start off with just what years like were you in LOSD for like the whole kind of K through 12 experience?
Yeah, I was kindergarten through 12th. Kindergarten through sixth grade, I was at River Grove Elementary, and then went to Waluga Junior High. The youngsters might not even know what Waluga is, might just be a thing they've heard once or twice. But yeah, I was there from seventh and eighth grade, and then I went to Lake High School and graduated in the class of 2007.
Yeah, and when you were in LO, just kind of like in general, where did you or your family go for community? Or I think I know in a lot of cases where people have to go outside of LO for community.
I come from an interesting historical ethnic background. My dad is Native American and he's from, right here. And right here could be in the coast of Oregon. It could be all the way out to Hood River, down to Klamath Falls in the south. We have ties and from tribes all over the state of Oregon. And so we are enrolled with the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. My mother, she's from the island of Guam. And I'm saying this to kind of like set up the next thing I'm about to say is like my dad was given up for adoption. He was born in the 40s, 1949. So I was the last of his kids. And, it's very common for a lot of Native American kids to be given up for adoption. And it's still an issue in a different way than it was then, but it's still an issue today. But he was given up for adoption. And so he was raised with, having white adopted parents. And then my mom, she came from Guam, and they obviously met, and then they had my sister, and then they had myself. But as far as like culture and community, that's always been something that's lacking. And growing up in an area like Lake Oswego, that didn't make it any easier. So there really wasn't a place that I went for community outside of my mom's side of the family, like our family reunions or like barbecues, things of that nature. And that would mostly happen up in the Seattle area or Tacoma area, because that's where my mom's sisters, my aunties were living. They were living in Seattle. My mom felt like she needed some independence, I suppose. And so when she moved here from Guam in the 80s, she actually, after the first year living in Seattle, she moved to Portland. So I think in like 79 or 80, she moved to Portland.
Yeah, yeah. And with we talk about just cultural background and like the experience, especially in LO when it comes to experience like as a person of color, but then as experience with racism specifically, like I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but can you just kind of share about, yeah, what was that experience as far as like navigating the atmosphere in LL, navigating specifically like just
Yeah.
what like casual racism, I think when we were
Yeah.
going to school, obviously that's still the case in a lot
Right.
of ways.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
yeah, can you just talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. I think for me, it wasn't a thing. It wasn't apparent until it didn't become materialized as like truly apparent until I was maybe in sixth grade. I think in sixth grade I was really starting to figure out things like the dynamics. Like I can even probably go back as like, first grade or second grade or third grade. And like maybe there's a few things here or there. But for the most part, I think we were kids and my experience was great. I was treated as such, just like any other kid. But for me, things were starting to like kind of, people were starting to treat me different. I think when I got into about sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade, and it was like, oh, okay, it's become apparent. And it became apparent that I wasn't the norm. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't a person who was like maybe the prototypical person from that area. Um, so after that time, the casual racism thing, it became like I mean, it just was. It was an everyday thing. Whether I mean, the phrase that comes to mind all the time, at least for me, was like "dirty Mexican," and it wasn't like it was pointed at me. It was just a phrase that was said almost in an endearment. And like I'm sure you can hear it in your memories, like of kids just calling other people like, "Oh, you dirty Mexican." Like that was just a thing. Like even if a teacher had heard that, it would. I don't even know if they would have like reprimanded that or scolded them or said, "Hey, don't say that." It might have been like in passing in the hallway, they might have just like shrugged it off because it was just kind of part of the culture. It was like it was just that was a thing. And so having these sort of norms, um, being around was it's not very good for people of color, and it's not good for people who are not of color either. It's just a thing that we hopefully eradicate more and more.
Yeah, it's always interesting, like especially with that the like joke framing of it. That's
Yeah,
especially it's like hard to process when you are you're just growing up trying to figure out, especially when you stand out in a space
yeah,
like this, and it's always at least in my case, I always think about like being in like an English class or social studies or something, and just we're just reading a textbook out loud, and like it's not even like context of like a racial slur or something, but it's just like someone reads the word monkey, and then you have like a few kids just like stare over at you and kind of like giggle or whatever, and it's just like, hey, that's
wow,
it's not
yeah,
even a joke. There's no punchline there, but
yeah.
it's just like I think that the idea of like it's part of the culture of this, and the excuse would be, well, we make fun of everyone, so it's fine. But it's different when like
Yeah,
one, you're like the only black kid in the room.
for real.
You actually like you're dealing with in addition to like casual racism from your classmates, low expectations, other stuff from your teacher. Like, yeah, it's just like the again, we don't understand power dynamics like that when we're 13, 14, 15, 16, but you you feel it. It's real.
Oh,
It's not easy enough to just say, or it's not just enough to be like, well, we insult everyone. We have jokes about the Irish too, so you're fine. Like, no.
yeah.
Yeah. So, a few years ago, we actually you were gracious enough to kind of lend some time to the Lake Ridge Equity Council to come by the shop back when it was at over at Lloyd Center. And we're going to talk about cultural blends and everything a little bit more in detail. But just wanted to, as a Lake Ridge alum, thought it'd be great to bring the Lake Ridge Equity Council over just to talk to you, get some perspective. And said a few things during that really kind of just like stuck with me. One, again, we
Mm.
talk about like we met through basketball, and shout out to Coach Otis wherever he is, but back in seventh grade spring ball, and obviously like basketball culture is a big thing for you. But like one, can you just talk about one, just like what did sports mean as far as like your school experience at LO?
What was your question?
Like what did sports kind of like mean to you as far as like your school experience at LO?
Well, sports was like I love sports. I love the competitive aspect of it. I think for me, when I think about sports, I kind of have you know, like a jaded just memories, I suppose. It was like, dang, I wish I could have done this, or I wanted to play varsity basketball, but I was so small, so I decided like, this is becoming difficult, and coaches and the politics of things, and so it brings up those sort of memories. um but I love sports, you know what I mean? Sports has taught me so much about myself, and it's taught me so much about life. I ended up golfing, and really picking up golf because as a kid, even from when I was in elementary school, I wanted to be a professional basketball player. I love the game. I don't know if anyone has loved the game as much as I love the game. That's not true, but I love the game so much, Bruce. You understand, like when you love like just the game, like on a deeper level, it's just like it becomes a part of who you are. Um, and I've always had that with basketball, but when I was maybe my freshman and sophomore year of high school, and I was playing JV2, And I was so short, I was a late bloomer. I was 5'1" at the end of my freshman year. And you know how Lake Oswego kids are, long and gangly and and 6'4" for no reason and stuff. And I was just like, bro, this is getting hard. And my biggest thing was like, I didn't work out as well as I should have, because there was that notion, and this is probably a thing of the past that probably doesn't quite exist today, but it was like, I didn't want to work out because I felt like it would stunt my growth. You know what I mean? Like even push-ups and sit-ups and stuff, maybe it was an excuse, but like I was afraid that if I like really was in the weight room, I was not gonna grow. And and that was the big thing. It was like, I always wanted to like, I'm gonna get to, like, my doctor says I'm probably gonna be 6 feet, so that was a thing. But then I ended up golfing, and then was semi successful, I suppose, in my high school golf career, so that was fine. And yeah, sports was a good outlet for me.
So yeah, part of the reason I asked that, because I feel like it was similar for me as far as when I look back on things, whether I knew they were coping mechanisms or like outlets at the time or not, like sports was definitely something that I could get, you could lose yourself in. And I mean that in this case, I mean that in like a good way of just like,
Yeah.
okay, I can dealing with all the other stuff in school, but like I can just, when I'm on the court, when I'm, doing like the conditioning or weight training and all that, like
Yeah.
I don't have to, you know, obviously like all the other stuff is still there, but
Yeah.
it's just something like, take your mind in place. And also, again, just like looking in retrospect, became a source of community building. I was talking with another student who's like significantly, or after like our time, about how like they went to LOHS like I did, but they did like all the like spring and like extracurricular sports with Lake Ridge, which is kind of like, again, similar to my experience. And as always, as I look back and think about, my fondest basketball memories, like we won a state championship, and that's not anywhere close to like top
Wow.
5 or 10, you know.
Wow.
Even it's even funny, like you talk about, I had similar dreams, like I want to be a pro basketball player. I remember this assignment where you're supposed to like write out your future or whatnot. I was like, I'm gonna be 6'8", I'm gonna be this great rebounder, all this thing. And then,
Yeah.
I end up, my teammate ends up being Kevin Love, who was actually that person. So
For
I was
real.
like, oh, that is
Right.
cruel. but
I know, for real.
but it was good for, focusing and being like, yeah, I should take writing more seriously. But but
That's
anyways, you
that's
know,
funny.
I think like having, coaches like Otis, Coach Scott, and also just, and now I hadn't really thought about, it's like, oh yeah, a lot of my like black coaches were on the Lake Ridge side or like Lake Ridge affiliated, not LOHS. And maybe that also had something to do with feeling
Mm.
more comfortable with that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but yeah, to the basketball point though, during that interview with the Lake Ridge Equity Council, you also made a note about sort of like an observation about like how black students specifically like are treated, or like were treated at Lake Ridge if they were athletes versus if they weren't.
Oh
Uh
yeah.
yeah, could you just like expand on that? Because I think it's like a very
Yeah, I actually talked about this sort of recently and was explaining to someone who went to Liberty High School, and Liberty High School is out like in Hillsborough, and they have they have a, not necessarily like an upfront racism, but it was more of a covert racism. And I kind of shared a similar experience at Lake Ridge, where it was, like we were talking about, that there are these like cultural phrases or norms, not, you know what I'm saying? Like things that just shouldn't be said, that were just casually said. And it was just like part of the everyday slight racist experience. But for the most part, for me, it was like a lot of indirect racism. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there, Bruce. What were we? Oh, you were. Oh, okay, okay. Talking about the black students. Yeah, the black students that played sports and stuff. It was almost like they were put on a pedestal. You know what I mean? I'm just gonna say, by the white the whites student body. They were definitely put on a pedestal and stuff, and like anything that was anything that would that they would maybe hold as prejudice and stuff, like it just went out the door. And it was almost like this weird math equation of like, oh, they're really good at sports, or they're cousins with Damon Stoudemire or something. There was like a weird thing where it was like, okay, so then they become vaulted up and stuff. But then if there's other students, and I'm thinking of, I can picture a few students who are more alternative or stuff, but they were black students, and it was like, oh, here's par, here's a golfer, here's par, and they were like, some are way under. But if they were good at sports and stuff, it was like, oh no, everyone wanted to be friends with them, and like, I don't know. So it was weird, man. It was just like it's hard to describe it because it was like, oh, it was just a weird, weird. It was a strange experience. Yeah.
And I think about that as like someone who's definitely not like I have like a jock like personality. I'm definitely more just nerdy person. I just happen to play basketball, and I always think about kind of like reflect on that as far as like, okay, if I had, let's just say like the basketball thing didn't work out, and I was just going to LO, like would I have even
Right.
would I have even stayed, or oh no,
Yeah.
like found it, because I feel like a lot of cases like basketball, the sports aspect is what honestly like made it tolerable in a lot of cases, or at least
Right.
made it, yeah, just again, like having something to do, having that outlet, having some level of like the validation you get from just you know being involved in one of these activities or something.
Right.
um
That reminds me, because I didn't have I didn't play basketball at Lake Ridge, I didn't play varsity and all that type of stuff. But after, in my early 20s and stuff, and just playing basketball in leagues and stuff, like my personality doesn't, like, similarly to you, it doesn't fit the typical, prototypical jock. Like, kind of, my brain is kind of like a creative type and stuff. But I've always been good at basketball. So it was like I could always use that as some sort of ammunition that like protects me. Or people, like, they'll be like, oh shit, like this guy's a little bit weird, but yeah, make sure to not bite on his pump fakes or some shit. You know what I mean? Like there is something there where I could always use that as like, yeah, you may be cool or whatever, but I'll probably cook you on the court. Like, that was always a thing, which kind of gave me, it helped like with like confidence and like maybe identity and things of that nature. But yeah.
oh, no, I have a fourth grade. I transferred to Forest Hills. I remember it was like the day after, it's like the days before recess basketball and the days after recess basketball, because like however shy you know me and remember me from back in the day, was
Yeah.
even worse. As like,
Yeah.
no one would talk to you, whatever. And then it was one day, it was just like play basketball recess, and people find out, oh, Bruce can play. And it's like a whole different thing of how people engage with you. And like you said, like everyone wants to talk to you now and all this
Yeah.
stuff. And it's like, oh, it's because I can play basketball. I can just
Yeah.
dominate the random kids at recess.
Yeah,
It's
I believe, bro. I believe you were big. You were a lot bigger back then than you are now. Like, I think you're what, 6'2", but back then, bro, it was like, oh, Bruce is big. Bruce was big. Are you left-handed? No.
so I'm not left-handed, but
You
I
shoot a
I
lot of shit
broke
with
I
left
broke
hand.
my hand one summer, so I had to like train
Yeah.
just left-handed for 2 months. So
Yeah.
like whenever I play horse with people, that's kind of like my cheat code. I will just go all left-handed just to be obnoxious.
Okay, Kobe. Okay.
Hey, once upon a time, Larry Bird cooked the Blazers for a full game
Right.
left-handed.
That's crazy. He had a ton of points too, like what, 30 some or 40 or something. It was wild. All
Yeah,
left. That's unheard of.
yeah, it was silly. But to bring it back though, as far as when we think about, we talked about Otis earlier, but you know, there's a duality with kind of like getting through with the LO experience, the school experience, when you think about like adults and like people in, mentorship or leadership positions who are helpful, but also those who were not so helpful or very very harmful in some cases. I was curious, like, if you have any yeah, there are like instances that come to mind of either of those, like someone who was just like particularly helpful in kind of like helping you navigate, or instances where people were really kind of going out of their way to be an obstacle.
That's a great question. That's a great question. I had fantastic teachers in elementary school. I had I had a good experience with my teachers. I didn't have one single teacher that I was upset with or felt like was pitted against me or any of that nature. Um, I will say I did have an experience. So in sixth grade, if you were in like a elevated math class or whatever, the one level up in like seventh grade math, whatever that was, you would they would put you on a bus, like a small bus, and there's a few of us from River Grove that went to Palisades, and then I think Palisades was sort of like the hub, and then a couple kids from the different schools would go and meet there for the morning math class. And I just remember, and it was a very interesting, like, congregation of all these kids, because it was like kids from Palisades and Westridge and maybe another school on our side, and then River Grove. And so it was like a mix of all these different kids for the one class. And actually there's kids from it was either Forest Hills or one of the other schools too, because there was Lake Oswego, kids that would filter to Lake Oswego High School that were in that class. And so that's where I had a couple experiences with a student who was didn't want to be in my group. We were assigned like groups, like, hey, everyone, you're A, B, C, D, in your little group, and then everyone who is B went to the B table type of thing. And so we get into these groups, and this one kid, you could bleep out the name, but it was Riley Werner. He was like, I don't want to be in your group, or you're not welcome to be in our group, something of that nature, you dirty Mexican. And for me, I was like, what? I was like, what? And because the kid that he was hanging out with is like brown skin and like black hair, and that was like his friend. And I was like, maybe he was mixed or something. I have no idea. But I was like, bro, like because I peeped who he's talking with the whole time or whatever. It's like, I don't know what ethnic enclave he's assigned to, but he's not white. And I just remember he was like, I don't want you to be in my group, you dirty Mexican. And I was just like, bro, is this real life? You know what I mean? This is not indirect. This is very direct. And I just remember that being crazy. And I want to say that I told the teacher that, and she was an old teacher. She might have been like in her 60s by then. But I just remember she kind of was like, it just was almost like she might have cared, but she didn't care enough to like do anything about it. It was like, you're not even really my student. You're from another school. Like, it just seemed messy, or it just wasn't a value of her. Like, she heard the words, the audio went into her ears, and her brain processed it. But like the reaction that I got from it was just like, not like sympathy or empathy or care. It was just kind of like, this isn't a problem big enough to justify me, you know, doing anything about it. So that was one experience that was more of the like direct side for me, and then at that point, like all I could think of when that happened was like I'm not even Mexican, you know what I mean? And like and that like when I think about that, like it's that's for me it was just there's so much pressure, especially at a school like that. There was so much pressure where it was like the norm was like, for whatever reason, it was like, oh, Mexicans were always like at the bottom or something. And so it's like, I'm not even that, you know what I mean? It was like, I have value, it's like, I am of some value, you know what I mean? And then that wasn't even right for me to like to think that. It was just like I was just trying to figure that all out. So yeah, that's a real story. So, you know.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure I know the other kid you were talking about in that story.
Okay.
But
That guy,
I, c-
whoever that guy is,
I,
he's some sort of something. I don't know what he was. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, even that, like, because
And he was right there. He was right there. Like, I was like, like, wow, you must be a fucking what? I don't know where I am. I was like, I'm sorry, I don't
Yeah.
know.
No,
Yeah,
because like these wild experiences and how how teachers, administrators, staff people react to them. That like you said, like there's that not caring enough factor that
it,
is so common in these stories, whether it's those like those one-on-one or comments in the classroom type things, even stuff that like I don't know, the incident that comes to mind for me is we played Lincoln in a state tournament one year, and the whole student section is chanting "You can't read" and "hooked on phonics" to one of their players. Of course, it's a black player just at the free throw line, the game, and of course, that makes the news because it's like wow, this is wildly racist and wildly public. So
right.
they have to make an announcement at the just at the beginning of class for that Monday after. And I just remember being like a social studies class where the teacher reads
Yeah,
the statement and the announcement, and then of course a bunch of kids are like, no, what are you talking about? Why are you taking it so seriously? It was just a joke. And the teacher just like being like, yeah, brushing off and just moving on. And it's like, we're just
mm,
we're not
mm,
we're just not we're not gonna do anything. We're not gonna there's nothing here. We just this is what we do. Cool.
yeah,
Cool. Like
we,
we don't wanna God forbid we make the students make the students any more uncomfortable after again the student section representing the school just did this in a way that again
yeah,
was like covered, hit the news, and these incidents happen like some years after we graduated. There's I
right.
guess like the LO football game where the students start like breaking into the N word because it's in the like because I guess Gold Digger's playing, and I know they did
Uh,
like a whole like Blackish episode about that like years after that, but like that happened. Student, was a football player at first at LOHS, and then his teammates were calling him the N word on Twitter. Then he transferred to Lake Ridge, and the coach there like physically assaulted him in a practice. Like this
mm,
stuff just and again,
yeah,
like people just like pass it off like, oh, that doesn't. Well, the common thing I hear from people who are at least trying to they want to be on the right side of history, I guess, but don't want to do anything as well. That doesn't represent us.
right.
And then again, but they just say that and move on. Like there's no
Mm,
support, there's no help. It's and it's just something you want to, as we talk about kind of like pushing this work forward and being like better supportive, especially of like students of color in Lake Oswego. I think one thing that's important is just like we gotta. I get a little hesitant with the word like allyship because it's just been so watered down, but like you got to raise the bar to at least to be kind of present, like just being a I don't know, being a passive bystander watching this and uh saying, well, you said this, it's 50-50, let's move on. Like that lets you know you're not welcome in these places. You don't have to
yeah,
say a slur to be if you just if you're willing to just like sit there and be like, hey, I'm in charge here and I'm letting this happen. I don't know.
right.
That's kind of my
Yeah,
assessment of it all. But
yeah,
yeah, I want to talk about a little about yeah, let's actually talk about cultural blends, and I think especially like considering uh just considering your experience growing up in LO to have like this apparel brand,
yeah,
multiple stores based on this idea literally of like blending
yeah,
culture, I think is pretty I don't know,
yeah.
it's very fitting actually.
Yeah, thanks, man. It really derives from childhood, and it derives from these type of experiences where I didn't feel like I ever quite fit in, and and obviously just with the start that I had of my parents or my father not knowing like his ancestral roots and culture and connection and stuff, and so that disconnect already kind of like for a kid now you're coming when I get to that sixth, seventh, eighth grade, and I start figuring out, like, I suppose my like position in life, or just that type of things, it adds another layer of like, you know, a slight like mental barrier that you have to work through. Um, and I'm sorry, Bruce, I get on these tangents. What was your question, bro?
I just wanted you to talk about sort of like
Oh,
the
cool. Yeah,
story of cultural blends coming together. And
right.
yeah.
Yeah, so I okay, so I see where I was going was you know, having my own personal, like, internal things that I had to work through. Cultural blends almost was it was almost like a flower. It bloomed, and it kind of blossomed into, like, this is like what I'm learning. This is what um this is how I've grown, so to speak. And so my whole, like, thesis and philosophy for cultural blends is to basically, create products that are based off of a belief that if you learn about other people's cultures, that you'll find a commonality, or you'll find some sort of common bonds. And with those bonds, that's how we, like, just tighten the fabric of humanity a little bit, or you're able to see someone's perspective. And that goes big and into many different ways. But so that was the thesis of cultural blends. And so, I did what I could with the money that I had to put into product and to tell stories and stuff. And the biggest thing, I think, my biggest, like, weapon, I suppose, to grow the brand was just, like, authenticity. And just, it was truly my story to tell. And I think people got behind that, because in telling that story, it shows a lot of, like, vulnerability, I suppose. And I think, I did have a knack for making good product. I'm not a fashion person. I'm not a stylist person. I'm a very, like, everyday casual dude. But I think the messages that I was telling through the products, but also, like, just through, the platforms, social media, etc., or even just talking at events, I think people could sense that, like, oh, this guy's he's got it. He's got the thing. He has it. And I think it inspired people, and because of that, they were willing to pay the 20, 25, $30 for a t-shirt that was cool enough to purchase. So I think that was my biggest thing, was just people saw something in me. And it's like, it's one of those things when you're, like, living life through a purpose. And my purpose was to like, uh, you know, my purpose was to shine light on we have a lot more common things with, you know, different cultures than we have differences. And that's the beautiful thing about human beings is, we're all human. So yeah, so cultural blends kind of it went on for some years. To make a very long story short, we ended up opening up a shop in 2018. And when I say we, I really mean me, but I just hate talking, like, in first person about things like that. So we opened up in 2018, and we were there for 4 years. And in between that time, it turned into a like a buy sell trade format, and that's its own story. But that happened, and so, it kind of turned into cultural blends, turned into something that I liked, not loved. And I originally went into it something that I loved. It was like a true purpose. But then it became, like, about I had to keep going, and to keep going you need money. And so it was about, like, turning a profit, and not in a bad way, just in a matter of fact way. um and stuff. But the store was beautiful. It was a great time. But it just, our business model changed, and that's great, because it ended up, I'm actually right outside the other shop right now in the parking lot. But it uh it allowed me to kind of compartmentalize my love for basketball, which always bled into the creative work at Cultural Blends. I'd always, like, do basketball related stuff. But now that I opened up back to the basket, it takes that same model of a buy sell trade, but it's all basketball related. So sneakers, jerseys, t-shirts, signed shoes, game worn things, it all lives at back to the basket. So it kind of helps me compartmentalize the basketball side into its own thing. And then I can, with cultural blends, it'll revert back to how it originally was. And that was kind of like a personal journey, so to speak. and create products, create things, and tell stories from a perspective more of like ethnic culture.
You talk about, not saying we because you all say me in there and kind of put it on yourself, but I just want to kind of like give you your flowers for one, just doing like really just doing this on like a scale that I think the fact that you were just like you were holding it down Lloyd Center for years, you got back to the basket. Now you're like the community building, like it's not just like it's a great product, but also like you said, like the story behind it, the inherent community building. You know, I know you're doing like events. Was it like Free Shot Friday? You got now like an ongoing like hoops in the park,
Yeah.
uh, where you're inviting people from all over the city to come just one play basketball, but two also like network, meet each other again, build community, and it's one of those things that's just like I think again it's just like it's a great model for uh one kind of like taking not just obviously like the LO experience is like part of it, but just like some of like the lessons from that and like trying to like create the community, create you know a more connected community that we want to see. And
Right.
I was curious as far as like if whether it's like city of LO, since they have the farmers markets, they have these different events, or the school district has ever like reached out because like you're here, you're well like and they're always like looking for these stories to for these
Huh.
people, these stories to show the kids.
You
And
know,
yeah.
yeah, they no one has, and I almost like, I think a lot of it is I never when there's an opportunity to mention, where I'm from or where I grew up at, you know, I never will say, where I was from or where I grew up at unless someone asked me directly.
Mhm.
It's one of those things where it's like, I had not an incredible amount of trauma, but just enough trauma where it was like, you know, I I don't want to be associated with that. I hate telling people like, oh, I'm from Lake Oswego because in my soul, like I'm not, you know what I mean? Like that just comes with too much baggage that I don't deserve, and so and I know you know exactly what I mean. It's like, it but no one has reached out, and I just like even myself, even like I could have reached out to the Lake Oswego Review on a couple things like press releases and things of that nature, but there's almost like a block there now that we talk about it. There's almost like a block there for me for like shit, I don't even want to be a part of it, like it's just but when I think about like you and I'm here on this call is like, man, Bruce needs an ally. And I think it would be good to be more connected, and especially because I know you guys have been fighting, and just to have your voices heard for quite some years now. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like part of the conditions we're talking about, where if it's a we can talk about all progress and what is different from when we were going to school, and that's is important. It's what we work for, literally. But at the end of the day, like if it's still the atmosphere is still like inhospitable, hostile, honestly, then what are we doing? Like we still have it's just one of those areas where I think, especially when we talk about like natural,
Mhm.
accessible connections to like make things happen. But it can't just be, it was just like me or just some person from Respond to Racism. And it's like, a group of like a few volunteers trying to do this when the city has resources and does these things and wants the credit for this work. It's just it always comes back to me as far as we got to start doing this, and we can't just be putting it on
Right.
someone here and there, someone who doesn't have the resources. And it's again, like I want to be that person who doesn't just like isn't just like the storm, the rain cloud on everything. Like
Right.
they just did they put up a mural of mom down at City Hall in Lake Oswego. It's like it is a big
Wow.
deal. It should be, celebrated.
Wow.
And yet I'm seeing people already starting to do the thing where it's like, well, since we have the second piece of public art depicting a black person in the city, pat yourself on the back. It's a job well done. Racism is over. And it's like you can't even sit in the moment of that because it gets manipulated or it gets, just used as some like excuse for inaction. So that's another tangent, but I'll
Yeah,
bring
for
it
sure.
back to you're talking about your father and you know kind of like getting reconnected with the Confederate tribes of Grand Ronde. Could you talk a little
Yeah.
bit more about that journey and that experience?
Yeah, that's been really really good for me, and it's kind of happened in this more like in the last 5 6 years, and my dad he was given up for adoption, and he went to David Douglas High School, graduated in 1968. Uh, but yeah, there wasn't yeah, I think in his class there's only like 4 students of color or something, but that's really changed because I think David Douglas is probably, if not the most diverse, is one of them. Um, but yeah, he's a strong man. My father's a strong man. He was uh Vietnam era veteran. He didn't serve. He was a tank commander, and he was, doing that macho man stuff, and lost a little bit of hearing because they're practicing boom big cannons and stuff. Wasn't wearing ear protection because that people just didn't do that, I guess, back then. And ended up being a firefighter. He's the first Native American firefighter for the city of Portland, so that was pretty cool. I don't know if that's 100% true, but I say it to people. And and yeah, he's a strong man, and he had to be because the way he looks, like, he's more of a dark complected Native American. You know how Native Americans get nowadays. He's a darker Native American man, and but mostly was just around, like, his white friends and stuff. So he's culturally, I know I've talked to him. He doesn't bring it up much. He's one of those, like, don't say much. I'm a man, but he's brought it up where he tried to kind of make his way back and like figure things out, but he always says this phrase. It was like a square peg trying to go into a round hole. It just didn't feel right, and and so he just kind of was sort of resented, his Native American heritage, and because of that, I think he was just more easily accepted, I suppose, by the city of Portland, his friends, things of that nature. But he definitely had a hard time. But he was just tough as nails. So if anyone stepped to him, it was probably a bad idea. He's that type of guy, and I try to take that spirit to the basketball court, but on outside the court, I'm pretty jovial. So we're completely different. We're very completely different. But yeah, now he's a good guy. He's a really good person, and I think I learned a lot of things just from listening, watching him and observing him, and how he would treat homeless people, how we would you know tip people at the restaurants and stuff, and he just treated everyone like how they ought to be treated, and I thought that was pretty cool because he wasn't a man of much words, and he still isn't today. So I definitely learned a lot of work ethic from him. 'Cause, he's also entrepreneurial, even though he wouldn't call himself that. He has a well, he retired last year, but he had a construction business, general contracting for quite some time. So I definitely watched him put in a lot of hours, like crazy hours and stuff. But yeah, good dude. He'll never, like, I think he's gonna. There's a powwow coming up on next Saturday. Or wait, no, it's the 18th, 19th, and the 20th of this month down at Grand Ronde, and I will be playing in a basketball tournament there. It's a 3-on-3, and that is what's going to get him to come check out the powwow. So I'm really excited because my personal journey in finding, like, my heritage and stuff and reconnecting there I could see it. It inspires my dad to like to take those steps because it's a scary thing. And I remember like I went to like a wintertime powwow maybe 6 years ago, and it was the first time, and obviously it was like, the same deal if you were a black dude that was raised in Europe and never seen any other black people, or and you go to a function, and that's what it felt like. I was scared, I walk in, and stuff. And boom, 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 boom. The drums are going, and you see people in regalia and they're dancing. It was beautiful. And it was like, I heard something in my head, like I heard it in my head say, like, you're home. Like, I get like my arms tingling, my face is tingling. Like, that's just how I felt, and I walk right in, and I walk right back out to my car, and I call my dad, and I just tell him about it. I tell him, and for whatever reason, it was nighttime, and he's like goes to sleep at 7 o'clock in his recliner type of guy, and he picked up the phone, and I just was like, I barely call my dad like that, and so like I just called him, I just told him where I was, and he just, I think he might have said he was proud of me. And that was pretty cool. Like, that was because I drove down there because I wanted to go. Like, I've been always seeking culture and stuff, and that's the reason why I went to school in Hawaii, because that was close enough to, my mom's from Guam, so I was like, I've always been like heading back home or trying to, like, because you're not going to get that in Lake Oswego, so I've always been seeking like those roots, always looking for the roots, and so yeah, that was a cool. When I went down to the powwow and stuff, that was a pretty good moment. I felt like a lot of healing had begun and stuff, and any fears that I had of not being Indian enough, not knowing the culture and stuff, and though those things do exist, though those things do exist, I've only been welcomed with open arms, and and so that's been really nice, because I would just be honest, like I don't know the songs, I don't know our dances, and it's like a lot of people are like, they look around and they're like, and we're just learning too, no one knows. It's like your culture, our culture, you know wasn't to be practiced for the last 75 years, and so everyone's on their own journey back, and so that's the coolest thing that I've experienced in this past 6 years, is like everyone's on their journey back, but they're all on the same road, and I was like, damn, that's like, bro, that's it, like, that's the stuff. We're on different like intervals where, it's like, man, that's cool. And so, and the more I'm open about, like, I don't really know very much, it opens up a place in people's, like, you know in their body, in their mind, to be truthful and be like, we're all learning, opposed to being like, I'm the gatekeeper and I hold the culture and you don't know as much as me. It like disarms that, because that does exist for sure. But yeah. And otherwise, if they want to fight, I'm ready to fight, Bruce. Okay, I'm ready. Like, if you want to go there, I'm my father's son. You know what I mean? Like, it exists, but it's just like, I'd rather not. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's and more generally, like, just to experience so many people, so many young people of color in Oregon schools, where there's a so like when there's an opportunity to kind of like be more in community, especially if you're coming from a place like Lake Oswego, where there's that hesitation, because you are, let's say, like that, there are some of those people who definitely hold that gatekeeper, uh that gatekeeper energy, and they're always fun to deal with. But they're, like I said, that we're like you're not, that fear that you're not, you enough, or you're not enough of
yeah,
this, or what this is supposed to be, or this is what I'm supposed to be if I'm this identity. And then it can be, like you said, like, just so healing at whatever stage, when you just,
yeah,
like, when you find that community, you find like, oh no, I am where I'm supposed to be. I am, I'm with people. I'm with my people.
right,
And something that I try, like, and just encourage, I know what it looked like for me when I was in school, or, some of the groups I work with now, but it can always, and it kind of like, it changes from different place to place. But it's like something I always try to, like, encourage, especially, again, students who came from like schools we did, where it's like, yes, get out of this bubble and have that perspective. Even I was doing rites of passage in high school, and one of the things they would do was like, because most of the kids were in like Portland public schools, but then there were some of us who were either further out east, or in some like the private schools, or in place like LOHS, which might as well have been a private school, right? And like on the PPS in service days, basically like most of the kids would, because they had like uniforms and everything, like shirt, tie, or like kente cloth tie, certain blouses for it's like sashes, it's like purple sashes for the girls group. But like they would come and visit those of us like in the school. So like freshman year, I just remember everyone coming suited up, and of course my white peers, because this is how we understand race or nuances, or don't. They I vividly remember telling me like they thought we were being invaded by the Nation of Islam, and I it amused me enough, but also, you know, I noticed like they kind of treated me different after that day. It was like
Mm,
one of those weird, like, oh wait, Bruce has backup. I didn't know this type thing. It's not even like I was that close with all the other students, but it's just like the visual of that for them was different.
mm,
Like it's yeah, it's interesting, I'll
right.
say. Um,
Mm,
when you reflect, especially now, you are a father. Like
yeah.
like when you think about just time in LO, and we talked a little bit about it on like a business end, but like, do you feel like any of these experiences just like shape as far as like how you move through life, how you are now like raising a child?
It's raising a child is, it is it's quite a job. It's, I'm really thankful for my partner Sydney for being the most amazing mother. But thinking about what you know, that's a good question, Bruce. And I don't think I've quite formulated enough. Like, we're just raising him right now to be like a kind, and loving person, and accepting person, and I haven't quite gotten to the that like real world like scenarios quite yet with him, to be truthful with you. But I will say that, you know, so much of my experience, growing up in Lake Oswego will definitely, I would use those experiences to be teaching points for my son. Uh, I just haven't quite gotten there yet. He's still a little guy, and we're just making sure he doesn't like, he just wants to jump off everything right now. I'm like, bro, your knees are so flexible. I know, your ligaments are great, but bro, you need to be careful. Like, let's, like there's a ledge there, and he understands the ledge concept, and like the sharp corners stuff. But we're kind of there right now, and those things will definitely come up probably before he for sure before he goes to school. So
Sure, for sure. Well, one, thank you again for just taking the time this afternoon. Before I let you go, though, I like to always kind of like cap these off with just, based on not just your experience in like LO schools, but especially like the time after. And like, we talk about finding community, creating platforms for building community. And I'm not sure if there's like any insights from that, or any advice you'd have either for students just trying to like navigate, or for those of us trying to, do, whether it's like anti-racism work, just community building work in LO to help uh hopefully create a better experience for people.
you know it's kind of a general answer, I think, but I think going to those events, or going to those functions that you were invited to, when you get a Zoom call to talk about your experiences, take those. When you get the invitation to go to something, if you can go to them, especially the things that feel like you might be out of place or you might, be uncomfortable. I think I've done probably my best learning, or that type of stuff has always come from things that were unexpected, but I was glad that I went to them. And especially if it's something that's like, out of your norm. I think there's a lot of learning that can be done there. So I think uh, not finding the excuse to skip out on the event, but um, finding a reason to go to it. The reason being there will be something that's probably going to be a shift of perspective, or it's going to be you're going to take away something, you're going to learn something that you didn't even think about, it didn't even cross your mind, or you'll meet somebody that you were a person that you were probably always supposed to meet or at least cross paths with. um I think being uncomfortable has helped me a lot, and I think that's a great thing to do.
Sure, for sure. Well, Troy, thank you again for taking the time this afternoon. And yeah, again, I hope people are listening because this is valuable insights, valuable stories. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
I appreciate you, Bruce.